can help free us from those fears. This first reading is a simple story from Luke that you've heard many times. One day Jesus was standing beside Lake Gennesaret, or the Sea of Galilee, when the crowd pressed in around him to hear God's word. Jesus saw two boats sitting by the lake. The fishermen had gone ashore and were washing their nets. Jesus boarded one of the boats, the one that belonged to Simon, then asked him to row out a little distance from the shore. Jesus sat down and taught the crowds from the boat. When he finished speaking to the crowds, he said to Simon, "Row out further into the deep water and drop your nets for a catch." Simon replied, "Master, we've worked hard all night and caught nothing. But because you say so, I'll drop the nets." So they dropped the nets, and their catch was so huge that their nets were breaking. They signaled for their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they filled both boats so full that they were about to sink. When Simon Peter saw the catch, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Leave me, Lord, for I am a sinner." Peter and those with him were overcome with amazement because of the number of fish they caught. James and John, Zebedee's sons, were Simon's partners, and they were amazed too. Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will be fishing for people." As soon as they brought the boats to the shore, they left everything and followed Jesus. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Now I'm going to read another familiar passage to you. One I am sure that most of you have heard many times and may have part of memorized. But I want you to just listen, and when we're done reading, I want to hear how you feel about this reading. These are David's words. "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in before, behind, and before. You lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall hold me fast, shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will cover me, the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. How weighty to me are your thoughts, O God! How vast is the sum of them! I try to count them. They are more than the sand. I come to the end. I am still with you. See if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. How do you hear those words? Carol?
That was my Norwegian grandmother's favorite verse, and she would read it to us once in a while in Norwegian. But she would stress how important it was for us to pay attention to those words. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I like the way when I'm really down on anything, on myself or my appearance, or I go to that and it uplifts me and I realize he already knows what I look like. Everybody else has got to accept it.
So it's comfort to you and to Carol. Any other emotional responses to those words?
In some ways, it's almost scary to know that somebody knows my every thought and everything that I do. Because there are times when I wish you'd turn that thing off so it's not so known. Things you're not proud of.
Precisely, yeah. Psalm 139 has always been a source of comfort for me. It is very, as for Carol and for Michelle, it always lifts me up and upholds me. But Scott Clark, who is the chaplain at and dean of student life at San Francisco Theological Seminary, in his meditations on Ash Wednesday, said that it had always been a comfort for him. And then one day, as he was working with this psalm for a class on the prophetic spirituality of Howard Thurman, who, if you've never read Howard Thurman, you should look up, even if you just look online for some of his quotes. But anyway, while he was preparing for this class, for some reason the thought struck him, do we really want to be known like that? Seriously. Do we really want God to search and know us? Every bit of us? Even those broken places that we try to hide from everyone, including him and us? Do we really want God to know all our comings and goings? And to be familiar with all our ways? And then he said this, and I absolutely agree with him. And this is the one that kills me. Do we really want God to know every word we speak, even before it's on our lips? Because Scott says, because quite honestly, I'm sure that most days I've said at least 17 foolish things before breakfast. Haven't we all? Psalm 139 invites us into an honest, intimate relationship with God. A relationship of deep searching, of deep knowing. And here's the one that brings the comfort of deep abiding. Despite the fact that he searches and knows, God continues to abide with us. It invites us to listen to our own lives, to search our own lives, and to live in ways that are different from one day to the next. It invites us to stand with God, to notice and name our broken places, the hurts, the omissions, the commissions, the complicities, the oppression, and ask for healing and allow God to change us. Lent does that same thing for us. It allows us to listen. It invites us to notice the love and the grace and to give thanks, to enter into life with this God who goes with us in all things. We're talking about fears, particularly today, the fear of inadequacy. How about that gospel story? Did you hear the fear? Where did the fear come in that story? It's kind of a cool story. Here's all these professional fishermen who have caught nothing, doing what they knew how to do best, And then Jesus tells them, go out in the middle of the day, which is not the time to fish in Galilee, excuse me, and they catch more than they could possibly imagine. So, and then there's a twist at the end of this story. But where's the fear come in this story? After the miracle of the fish. And who is it that's fearful? Simon Peter. It's kind of interesting. I just noticed as I was reading this time that it calls him Simon right up until the point where he says, "Oh Lord, go away from me. I am not worthy." And there it calls him Simon Peter. And then after that in the story it calls him Peter. Because we know this man. We've been that guy. We have seen things that God has done, and it makes us aware of the distance between us and God. God's holiness, God's power, and our own weakness. That's what Simon recognized. And as we know, Simon was never afraid to speak up and say what he thought. So he falls on his knees before Jesus and says, "I can't do this. You are too scary, and I don't belong here. Go away." But you notice what Jesus does? What's the first thing he does after Peter says that to him? He tells him, "Don't be afraid." This is one of Jesus' do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. You know, it's interesting what he doesn't do. He doesn't tell him, "No, you're not unworthy. You're just wonderful." You know, like our schools who tell everybody they're wonderful and they're doing a great job. No, I'm afraid not. He doesn't say that. He skips over that entirely because he knows it's true, and so does Peter. He says, yes, you are unworthy, essentially, by not saying anything. But do not be afraid. Because even though you are unworthy, I called you. I chose to be with you, and I trust you. And I'm going to give you a job.
That's scary.
You're unworthy, but I'm going to give you a job, an important job. Instead of catching a bunch of fish, you're going to catch people. This unworthy man, regardless of his inadequacies, is given God's mission to spread the good news. How often do we hide behind our inadequacies? Use them as excuses to not listen to the calling of God. Jesus' response is, yes, you're inadequate, but don't be afraid because I am going to be there with you. Some stories. I've given you some of bits and pieces from Jill Duffield's sermons and writings in recent, the last couple of years. She's the editor of the Presbyterian Outlook. She tells this story about her early years in seminary and learning to become God's speaker. Stepping behind the pulpit of my home church, First Presbyterian Church of Mount Gilead, North Carolina, I've been there. At some point during my first year of seminary, I found my knees quaking and my lip on the verge of quivering. There could not have been a more supportive or encouraging gathering of people, and yet I was terrified. My task that morning was simply to read the New Testament lesson. I know the text was from 1 John. I remember because my pastor called me back after giving me the passage the first time to say, the reading is from 1 John, not the Gospel of John. Just be clear. I needed the clarity. That Sunday morning, having found 1 John near the back of what I knew to be the New Testament, my nerves took over and I did not even read the whole passage. Left off the verses my pastor preached on that day. Then she goes on to say, I preached my first sermon in that same pulpit a year or so later on April the 1st, Fool's Day. The hope I cling to is that I have been a fool for Christ ever since. Truth be told, even 20 years after my ordination, I still quake at the reality of proclaiming God's word and having been called to leadership in Christ's church. Amen. When the nurse handed my firstborn to me moments after his birth, I remember thinking, they're actually going to let me take him home. I knew how little I knew. Parenting is like that. Even now, 20 years and a few more children later, ministry is too. All the things that we do for God are like that. We are inadequate. And yet God walks with us and supports us and guides us in that inadequacy. I've been reading this little devotional book by Vanilla Morris called Simple Ways Toward the Sacred, and she has lots of wonderful ideas in here. And it's hard for me to pick pieces and make it make sense to you because it takes bigger sections. But she says, the mind divides, categorizes, analyzes, and defines. Our souls open, wonder, suffer, and love. To receive the gift of being, we must let go of the ways we define and give names to who we are. We cannot receive the gift of our being unless we suspend our own self-conceptions and definitions. Instead, we must become soul-wise and let the love of God reveal our inner beauty and our capacities. It means consenting to God's love. We are inadequate, but we can let that go if we consent to being filled with God's love. She says, so often the habit of self-criticism creeps into our minds. It's almost an imperceptible fog of dislike or niggling self-correction. Before long, this judgment mists over the gift and wonder of being and spills out into criticism of others and of the world. We may be surprised by how thickly this fog can cover our lives. Socked in, we are made blind. Could we come out of our fog into the blazing light and delight in being here at all? Could we be awestruck by the love that made us, by the sheer radiance offered us in the gift of being? Today, could I trade proving my worth for the joy of just being? That's a tough one for me. To give up my own trying to prove myself and just bask in the love that God continues to give, even though He knows all those failures better than I do. James Moore, he's written more, he has had the most books published by Abington Press that have been high sellers of any writer. He's a pastor. And this is from his book, Yes, Lord, I've Sinned, but I have several excellent excuses. Okay? Another story about his life as learning God's will and work in him. Sometimes our own insufficiency is what God finds the most useful about us. James Moore tells his past, he tells this, to illustrate this quirky divine preference for turning weakness into strength. While he was still a seminarian, he took a course in clinical pastoral education, CPE, the scourge of seminarians. One day means that you take a turn working in hospitals and clinical settings, supposedly helping people who are facing health crises. One afternoon, the head nurse took him inside and told him that there was a patient named Mrs. Davis who was in dire need of pastoral counseling because she was facing serious brain surgery the next morning with the double liabilities of poor physical condition and a soured, self-pitying spirit. Her chances of survival did not look good. Overawed by this life and death responsibility, the young Moore decided to let Mrs. Davis do all the talking and serve as an active listener, a soundboard for her fears and anxieties. Unfortunately, this plan was squelched when at the last minute, the nurse remembered to tell him that, oh, Mrs. Davis isn't allowed to speak. So, in a panic, he bumbles into this desperately ill woman's room, and as he does, he accidentally bangs the door into the wall and makes a huge noise, and then lurched forward into the room and tripped and kicked her bed. Mortified, he launched into a stuttering, stammering series of platitudes and prayers, saying all the wrong things and feeling that I had utterly failed to reach the woman's fears. Horrified at his own inadequacy, he left quickly. A few days later, Moore was amazed to find Mrs. Davis recovering nicely and in remarkably good spirits. Even more incredibly, this patient praised him and credited him with practically saving her life. But I don't understand. I felt so terrible. I was so ashamed. I did everything wrong. Moore moaned. She said, yeah, that's just it. I felt so sorry for you. It was the first time I had felt anything but self-pity for months. That little spark of compassion ignited in me the will to live. And the doctors tell me it made all the difference. God takes our raw material, which is often very raw and very wrong. Look at Simon Peter. He's a perfect example. Even up to Jesus' death, he didn't get it. And yet, this same man was the one who so boldly proclaimed Jesus' death and resurrection that he became the founder of the church, the Rock. Because he set those inadequacies aside and allowed God to work in him and through him. May we be willing to do the same. Amen. Our hymn of response is that we probably will use for most of Lent is 22:18. You are